Welcome to Chain Reaction, the Foreign Policy Research Institute's flagship network of podcast series examining the political, security, economic, and social trends shaping Europe and Eurasia. Throughout the year, we're talking with experts about developments in Russia's war in Ukraine, the new European security order, the past, present, and future of the Baltic states, Russia's political economy, and great power competition in the region. Join us each month for
Bear Market Brief,
Baltic Ways,
Report in Short,
and of course, our flagship, Chain Reaction. New episodes are available each week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. This week on Report in Short.
Russian strategic culture and the war in Ukraine. I'm Aaron Schwartzbaum, and this is Report in Short, the podcast where we bring you bite-sized versions of the latest in FPRI Eurasia program research. This episode, however, we're going to stretch out a bit because our guest has a very unique perspective on the war. Emphasis on the unique. Ukrainian Lieutenant Colonel Denis Yurchenko wrote a paper examining why Russia behaves the way it does strategically. Not only is it a fascinating paper, but he got special permission to join this podcast and speak with me. So let's hear from him. This is a slightly longer version of Report in Short.
Good morning, good afternoon, good day. I am Lieutenant Colonel Denis Yurchenko. I am serving in the Ukraine Armed Forces. So a small bio about me. So I was born in Vinnytsia region, in central part of Ukraine, in small town Ladizhin. You can see this name of town in the news when you see this missile attacks of Russian. So I spent here like 16 years and then moved to Kyiv. Started my military career at Military Institute of Kyiv National University, named after Taras Yurchenko. So my first specialization was the military lawyer. I finished the institute and used to be 3 years of military lawyer. And then I switched to international cooperation, military international cooperation, or MILCOP shortly. So I also studied in Poland, improved my English skills. Then I was honored to be moved to Estonia, to Baltic Defense College. And there I received my operational education, military operational education. So now I am serving in the officer responsible for cooperation with NATO and the European Union.
And very brave of you to be doing a podcast in a foreign language. I've had to do that once, and it was intimidating to say the least. So we're glad to have you with the podcast today. So I want to talk about your paper from FPRI this past fall. I will include a link in the podcast description. But I think to start, before we even get into the specifics of what you wrote about, can you explain strategic curve theory and the literature you were focusing on?
Strategic theory is quite new theory. It was developed by Jack Snyder in 1977 when he wrote his article about Soviet Union strategic culture. So the main focus of this theory is not to focus on state, but to analyze, for example, what elites think about, their biases, their knowledge, their experience, history of the country, also what society can think. And this is a mix of different ideas, and then this mix create strategic culture. So also we can find strategic culture in different strategic documents of country. Also we can use speeches of leaders, and we can read even articles when the society to see where society is moving. So this theory is interesting because it says that, for example, Russia, USA is not like country, and offensive realist will say that country want to receive hegemony, to be superpower and to have power, but strategic culture theory will say us why actually this countries do so. And this is quite, I think, now quite interesting because we don't understand very often other countries when we want to predict them, and also we don't understand even our allies. Sometimes we don't know a lot of other countries. We believe that they have the same values as Western world, and they will do rational things. And when we speak about Russian strategic culture, before 2022, when Putin started the war, this great war, so it was not rational to Western analytics, and they say Putin would not do so because there is no rationality here. But when we speak about rationality, it can have different meanings for different states. That's like a shortly about strategic culture theory.
Yeah, so if we could keep talking about this, I think this is a really interesting frame to view the war. How would you describe Russian strategic culture currently?
Russian strategic culture is actually very unique because it doesn't change for last 3 centuries, actually, even 4 centuries. Because Russian history is like a continuation of countries. For example, Russian Empire, then Soviet Union, and then Russia. Actually, it's mostly very similar countries. The size changed during centuries, but actually the main ideas was the same: empire, to conquer the neighbors, to have buffer zones with West, and very often sometimes West was friend, but most of the time West was enemy. And this ideas was actually well developed after Crimean War, when Russia was totally defeated by Britain and its allies. And then this so-called Russophobia from Western countries started well advertised and well promoted in Russian society, that West is enemy and West wanted to conquer us. And also, so firstly, when we want to analyze or to understand Russia, I used like 3 questions. What Russians believe about themselves, where they see their like place in the world. Then what is enemy? Who is enemies for Russia, and where the enemy is coming from for Russia, and that is using of forces. And very shortly, Russia believes that is global, like a great power, great states, global power, and this can mixed and with sphere of influence, and mostly the sphere of influence is in Europe, post-Soviet countries, which Western world called like post-Soviet republics. For the people who will listen to this podcast, post-Soviet countries is like Soviet Union used to have 15 republics, and when Soviet Union dissolved, 15 sovereign countries appeared on the map. But unfortunately, it was created some meanings like post-Soviet countries, meaning that these countries are very the same because they were in one state, but they don't have anything very similar actually. And sometimes these post-Soviet countries very confused Western people because they believe that like it's maybe the same, because the post-Soviet Ukraine, post-Soviet Russia, post-Soviet Belarus, post-Soviet Georgia, and so else. It means it's something similar, but similar was just that most this 14 republics was occupied by one republic, Russia, shortly. And then sadly, and the most interesting here is that Russia does not hesitate to use power and forces to resolve international issues. And this makes Russia very unfortunately terrible, because Russia does not hesitate to occupy other countries when they want to do so. It's like Georgia in 2008. When we speak about modern history, it's a war in Chechnya, Also, it's Transnistria region where Russian forces still deployed. Then Ukraine in 2014, Crimean occupation, then so-called hybrid war in Donetsk and Luhansk region of Ukraine, when Russian forces entered the Ukraine country, helped this the Donetsk and Luhansk, how they call Donetsk National Republics and Luhansk National Republic soldiers to fight against Ukrainian soldiers. And then, of course, is 2022 when Russia started occupation of Ukraine. So Russia, shortly, Russia is believe they are great power. Great power has the right to influence, sphere of influence. They have buffer zones from enemy. Enemy is the West, and using forces is good tool to dissolve international disputes. It's like shortly about Russia.
I'm curious your thoughts. You talk about this broad strategic culture that what's happening to Ukraine now is another part of 200 years of self-perception and policy. What do you think about with the current war, personal factors? I remember reading a lot about what would the Russians say, bunkerny ded, this Putin being locked in a bunker for 2 years during COVID and getting crazy ideas and deciding to do all of this himself. How do you see personal factors playing into what's currently happening? Do they matter, or is this really more of an elite consensus broadly?
Personal ideas is of course important because and it's more important when we speak about totalitarian regimes where so actually all powers is in one hand, and like Putin is the peak of this regime, and also he is surrounded by other his friends, allies, so-called siloviki. And in my article, I mostly analyze Putin's speeches and how he interpreted the world. And when you listen to the speeches, firstly they are very laughing about this LGBT problems, this family without parents, or and other Putin biases about West. But here is one interesting thing that Putin Putin managed and his circle managed to manipulate Western values. So when you speak about Western values in Western countries, they will say you about freedom of speech. But when you say Western values in Russia, you will hear about LGBT problem. So and here Putin and his circle, they showed the worst thing, how they think, how they see this. Like for them is the worst thing, and they try to say that free elections is bad because then it can be revolution, and then you will have like in Ukraine Maidan, and then you will have war because the Western wants to occupy you and so called. And personal biases are very important because elites, they have power, and they actually they forward countries in direction. If they see that West is enemy, they will fight, and it doesn't matter is it true or is it not. So in my article, I analyzed Putin's speeches, but I wrote also that it would be also like a continuation of analysis to analyze the siloviki, other people, Lavrov, for example, Shoigu, and other people who is in power with Putin for last 20 years. They biases also are important to find and to listen them.
Now, a follow-up question there. You spent a lot of time reading speeches and writings of Russian elites in the West and in Washington now for what almost 3 years have been debating whether Russia's invasion was about NATO or not. In your view, what led Russia to decide to invade Ukraine in 2022 this time? What actually is the cause here? If you could speak about that briefly, obviously, we could talk about that for a very long time.
I believe Putin just saying that So firstly, it could be like showing of power and to receive what they wanted in 2020, 2021 when they deployed troops on the border. I think they wanted. We can remember these two documents which were proposed by Russia: the agreements with NATO and the agreements with USA. And when you write these documents, you will see that Russia wants to regain sphere of influence, like a NATO back, NATO out of Poland and other new members, and like no deploying more, no any further other members in NATO sphere of influence. So Putin wanted to divide like a world into, like it used to be during Cold War, like a pro-Western world, pro-Russia, like a pro-USA world, or pro-Western and pro-Russian world. But Putin didn't receive what he wanted. And then also we should understand this society and all these ideas which were developed during last years in Russia, like this totally mobilization, totally pro-war speeches. We are very power. We will defeat all of them. Kiev in 3 days, parade in Kiev in the evening, and I believe that also a lot of people in this FSB or like this organization, they receive huge amount of money to bribe some politicians in Ukraine to create like a pro-Russian parties in Ukraine, and I believe that they just create this like a bubble of information that this will be very easy war, and Ukrainians are waiting for Russian soldiers to liberate them, because Putin in his speeches he don't say Ukraine, he say Kiev regime. It means that there are some people in Kiev who occupied Ukraine, how he wanted to say, and these people are enemy, but Ukrainians are not enemy for us. But the reality is, unfortunately, not so, because now there is no like Kiev regime, there is Ukraine, and Ukrainian people are died. So, but actually, I believe that some people created around him this bubble of information, and he even says that he doesn't have a mobile phone and he doesn't have access to internet, and we can just imagine what he received in his secret documents, what other people created for him. So believe that will be easy war, and they have enough power to resolve these issues, because soft occupation of Ukraine was not they were not able to occupy Ukraine in soft manner after 2014, and I just believe they wanted to resolve this issue one time by forces, and they believe that it will be enough.
So, continuing on this topic, we're talking about elite consensus, or that's the focus of your paper. What do Russian elites misunderstand about Ukraine broadly?
That Ukraine is not Russia. Ukrainians don't want to be Russians, and Ukraine don't want to live in Russia. And when we see this referendum about independence of Ukraine, 91%, like more than 90%, voted for independent Ukraine, and nothing changed. And Russian elites believe that Ukrainians is one part, like is post-Soviet country actually, but it's modern Ukrainians and our predecessors, they don't want to live in Ukraine, in Russia. They were just occupied and forces to do so. So the main understanding is that, for me, misunderstanding is that Ukrainians and Russia are the same people, and this is one nation. And like Ukrainians are the same Russians, but they speak not right Russian language, and that's why. And Russian, like Ukrainian language, was created by Austrian general staff, and this is like So the main problem here is misunderstanding that like three brother nations: Ukrainians, Belarusian, and Russians. But this is not true, actually.
Another question along this line: what do Western elites misunderstand about Ukraine?
I believe that, and I read some article after invasion where it was that pro-Western countries overestimated Afghan army because it was this when Afghan was occupied by Talibs, and Western elites and intelligence underestimated Ukrainian armed forces and Ukrainian nation. And the good, maybe not good, but evidence for this is like when all embassies were deployed from Kiev in 2022. And I believe it was maybe not like a signal for Putin, but Putin understood this like signal that Kiev is free. You can capture it. But it's just my personal opinion. Because I think it was very bad signal from Western world to redeploy embassies and all this international stuff from Kiev just before start of war. And also underestimate of Ukraine armed forces capabilities, underestimated of Ukrainian society, and overestimated Russian machine. Because Russian, all these parades during on 9th of May, like a parade of victories, there just was one more advertisement of Russian machine, like Russia is very powerful, Russia has modern rockets, rocket missiles, and everything would be destroyed in a few days, but it's nothing true. Like Patriot can destroy the most Russian modern missile Kinzhal. Patriot can destroy it. And I think the same is with this Oreshnik, so-called Putin new missile Oreshnik. It also can be, I believe, can be destroyed by other modern air defense system like THAAD or other. So this is like overestimated your Russia and underestimated Ukraine.
Last question we can turn to while I have you today. So while I have a member of Ukraine's armed forces here on the podcast, and thanks again for joining. We've talked about whether the war is about NATO or not. The most recent debate this fall, and I'm sure will continue into the next administration, is about what kinds of weaponry can be provided to Ukraine to help in the war effort. And there was a big discussion about long-range missiles, whether that's good or bad or escalatory. I've seen other people say, no, actually what Ukraine needs most is just ammunition and fighting vehicles, and it's not even particularly fancy equipment. Guess to ask the source, what does Ukraine need most now?
When I start answering, I want to mention one time. It's not fight between NATO and Russia. It's fight between Ukraine and Russia. And NATO forces is not here in Ukraine. They're not fighting against Russians. Russian created also this myth that they're fighting against NATO because they just don't want to believe that Ukrainian forces can beat them and they can fight against Russia. So in Russian mind is Ukraine is so small that it's not Ukraine, it's NATO forces, it's NATO mercenaries here in Ukraine fighting against Russian soldiers. But now we can see that Ukraine are fighting against Russia and now about North Korean. But not NATO, against Russia and North Korean and against Iran, Shaheds and other missiles which were provided. So it's just one time to mention. I will be very happy even few people in America understand that it's not fighting between NATO and Russia. It's just about Ukraine and Russia. And it was not provocation of Russia because of Ukraine wanted to join NATO. Nothing is here just because Russia believes that they're still enough powerful to start regain sphere of influence, and they former republics from Soviet Union. Because if not Ukraine, it would be Baltic states, and then Georgia, and then Belarus, and then it will be like great. So Russia version 2.0, and then we can fight against other, for example, Poland, Romania, and so on. And now about ammunition and weapon. It's modern war. Unfortunately, it's the biggest war after the end of World War II. It's not hybrid war. It's conventional war. Russia used all weapons it has without just nuclear weapon. So when Russia can hit Ukrainian cities by rockets which are launched 1,000 and more than 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine, it means that Ukraine should have and has to have the same. And when we speak about help and aid to Ukraine, it's not only help to Ukraine and aid to Ukraine. It's investment for future, for peaceful Europe. Because, as I said, if not Ukraine, it will be other NATO countries, and then NATO should fight. American soldiers should come and help its allies in Europe, because NATO Article 5 says so. So now Ukraine needs all weapon Western world can provide. It's jets, it's tanks, it's fighting vehicles, it's ammunition, it's systems, it's air defense, of course, is very important now. So everything West can provide, I believe it should provide, because it's not for only for Ukraine, it's investment for peaceful Europe. I believe all wants this, to have peaceful Europe and to not to see the cities are destroyed. And also, so we don't have any self-deterrence tanks from Poland or from Germany or from USA. It doesn't change. Just it's tanks, and they are operated by Ukrainian soldiers, not by Americans or Polish or NATO forces. It's Ukrainian forces. When we speak about rockets, missiles, it's also very important, because Russian logistic machine can be destroyed only by deep strike. Deep strike is very important now for us, because to move war from Ukraine to Russia, to Russian citizens see that war is not very far from Russia, but it's in Russia. And now they cities, they like military factories, military training fields, military barracks can be destroyed very easily. Military jets, it's easier to destroy military jets on the ground than it could be destroyed in the air, like by air defense. It's more efficiently and more effective. So here should be not any self-deterrence. I believe everything can be provided, should be provided to finish and to finish this war and to create this peace, but peace which will be good for Ukraine and Western world, not good for Russians. So also very important, this victory. And to finish, I would like just few words. So now our president, Volodymyr Zelensky, presented victory plan. It means that Ukraine has victory plan, and now this question for West: does West have this victory plan and this like one strategy where we heard it from? Because NATO declared Ukraine would be part of NATO. European Union says the same. It means that Ukraine will be integrated fully into Western alliance and Western unions. It means that Ukraine will be part of Western world. It means that Ukraine will be very, I think, strong. Ukraine armed forces will provide very great capabilities, and these Ukrainian brigades and Ukrainian armed forces will be good to have in NATO, not in Russia. Then we'll be fighting for NATO.
Denis, thank you very much for joining the podcast today. Good to hear your opinion, and we thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to Lieutenant Colonel Yurchenko and to you, listener, for joining. Be sure to read the Hall Report at the link in the description. Report in Short is brought to you by FPRI, that's the Foreign Policy Research Institute, a nonpartisan think tank based in Philadelphia. For more information on this initiative and on many others, visit fpri.org. This is Report in Short. We will catch you next time.